As we head into the new year, a study is outlining what Black Americans want in 2020. The think tank Third Way and the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies commissioned a series of focus groups in Atlanta, Detroit, and Philadelphia, followed by a survey of 1,200 Black voters and non-voters. The biggest takeaway was described as something, quote, self-evident to most Black Americans, but unfortunately something that goes too often overlooked by political pundits, policymakers, campaigns, and the press alike. Black people are not monolithic. Antjuan Seawright is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. He joins me now from Columbia, South Carolina, to discuss this research. All right, Antjuan, there is a lot of territory covered in this report, but I want to start with location. The survey found that a majority of Black Americans live in the suburbs, small towns, or rural areas outside of urban areas. What did you make of that?
Oh, I think that's spot on. Look, I'm from South Carolina. I grew up in rural South Carolina, and having done campaigns in 38 states across this country, specializing in focusing on African American voters, I totally understand what this survey is saying. I think it's spot on. But the real question for Democrats is, how do we take this information and turn it into a winning strategy for elections to come? What we do know is the most loyal voting bloc in the Democratic Party are African American voters. That's been proven time and time again. And what the survey has said to us is, one, Black voters are not monolithic. Two, they have not pledged their allegiance to any particular political party. And number three, they want to be courted and have a relationship built with them. And I think that's something the Democratic Party has to consider. And if you are a Democratic entity, a candidate or a committee, there's no way in hell you can ignore this information being put out and want to be successful in elections to come.
Yeah, I would imagine there are probably a lot of strategists poring over the details of this report. Well, according to the researchers, one topic that came up unprompted in nearly every focus group was gentrification. 69% of survey respondents say the cost of living in their neighborhood is going up faster than wages. So, Antjuan, is this something that is being addressed enough by politicians?
Well, I'm not sure. It's not one of those things that pops up sexy on political surveys when you think about the national perspective. But when you think about local elections, and I oftentimes remind people, the closer your government is to you, the more important it is for you. When you think about local elections, this issue is a top priority and should be a top priority, particularly for municipal elections all around the country. And what we've seen over the past 3 or 4 election cycles, we've seen an increase in African American leadership at the municipal level. So I'm hopeful that will then translate or turn into really grabbing this issue by the horns and wrestling with it in a real way.
So nearly 8 in 10 respondents self-identified as Democrats, but not all in the same way. Fewer than half of Black Americans consider themselves, quote, strong Democrats. A third say they are a weak Democrat or independent leaner, and 22% say they're not a Democrat at all. So as a Democratic candidate, how do you appeal to someone who doesn't consider themselves a strong Democrat?
Well, I can tell you what, you better treat the African American vote as an investment, not an expense. And I think that there should be a sound, loud alarm for the Democratic Party to no longer take the most loyal constituency you have for granted and make some real long and short-term investments. And if we do not, it presents a real opportunity for the other side to make their case to African American voters about why they think they should be well positioned to receive their vote. And we've been saying this until we're blue in the face as African American voters. Do not take us for granted. Don't just show up to our communities a month out and call it GOTV. Do not just show up to our churches 2 weeks out and call it get out the vote. But spend time. Treat us like a real relationship. Treat us like you would treat every other constituency in the political election, because I wrote about this and I think I sent it to you, Elaine.
You did.
For some elections, for some people, elections are a choice. For other ones, they are an urgency. For African American voters, every election is an urgency.
So overall, African Americans are more interested in voting in 2020 than 2016, which saw a significant drop in Black turnout. 40% say their top reason for voting is to get rid of President Trump. Do you see that statistic as an advantage to any particular candidate in the race for the Democratic presidential nomination?
I don't, because as I've said to you many times on air, surveys or polls are simply a snapshot of the time. And in this environment, the temperature and the mood changes for so many different reasons. So while I do think Trump can be a motivating factor, if we follow that up with identifying his failure from a policy perspective and the impact it has had on African American communities, I think it can be used as a motivating factor, but I don't think it will be the total motivating factor for Democrats to turn out African American voters in next year's election.
Well, President Trump has staked much of his case for re-election on the state of the economy. But among Black Americans, 27% feel their personal finances have gotten worse over the past 2 years, compared to 22% who feel their standing has improved. So, Antjuan, how do you see those numbers? What should we take away from that?
Look, I think that sometimes Republicans think that cute talking points sometimes will run the day. I oftentimes remind people, forget about trying to make ends meet. There are people who look like me who are working 2 and 3 jobs hoping that ends will meet. And that's the story of our day. We've always started this game 10 points behind every other community. That's been from the beginning of time. And so when the unemployment rate is 5% in certain communities, it's 10 and 15% in others. And no one can forget that. And while the Republicans want to hang their hats on a low unemployment rate, that does not mean the working poor is not suffering. That does not mean people who look like me are sitting up on the edge of their bed at night, Elaine, trying to figure out how to make tomorrow work for them and their families. And so I think that that's so important for not only Republicans to understand, but for the media and for Democratic candidates and messaging purposes to understand.
All right, Antjuan Seawright, great to see you. Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you, Antjuan.
Happy New Year to you, Elaine.